In Caracas, he moved with motorcades, radio codes, guarded corridors, and men who believed repetition meant security. Nicolás Maduro had survived long enough to trust those routines. Every failed uprising reinforced the same lesson: the system worked. To the outside world, Maduro looked entrenched. To US intelligence, he looked predictable. And predictability, in the wrong moment, becomes vulnerability. The story did not begin with troops or aircraft. It began quietly, in legal language. In 2020, US prosecutors unsealed indictments accusing Nicolás Maduro of narco-terrorism, alleging that Venezuela's highest office had merged with international drug trafficking. At the time, the charges felt symbolic. Maduro was still president. He still controlled the military. He still occupied the palace. Indictments, however, do not require belief. They require patience. Inside US agencies, the file on Maduro never closed. It grew. Movements were logged. Associates mapped. Security patterns studied over years, not weeks. There was no rush, only accumulation. By the mid-2020s, Venezuela existed in a gray zone. Maduro governed, but much of the world refused to recognize him. He commanded the armed forces, but not the economy. He held power, but without consensus, even among allies. That ambiguity mattered more than tanks or missiles. In Washington, policy discussions quietly shifted. The question was no longer, can Maduro be removed? It became, is he already outside the rules that protect leaders? For decades, international norms relied on a shared belief. Sitting heads of state are untouchable unless war is declared. But norms depend on belief. And belief, in Maduro's case, had eroded. The proposal, when it surfaced, was deliberately narrow. No invasion, no occupation, no regime collapse. Just one objective: Nicolás Maduro. Supporters framed it as law enforcement. Critics warned it would shatter precedent. Everyone understood the risk. If it worked, expectations would change forever. Months of planning followed. Not because the mission was large, but because it was constrained. Every variable was measured: reaction time, civilian risk, military loyalty, international fallout. This was not about dominance. It was about control. Modern operations don't always announce themselves. On the night it began, Caracas felt normal. Streets were quiet, the city slept. Then systems hesitated. Radar flickered. Communication slowed. Backup channels lagged just enough to matter. To technicians, it looked like malfunction. To planners watching remotely, it was confirmation. Silence isn't absence. It's a weapon. Maduro was not at the presidential palace. He preferred a fortified military complex, designed for loyalty, not ceremony. Built to survive coups, not precision extraction. According to US accounts, the breach was fast, disorienting. Orders overlapped. Lights flooded corridors. Gunfire echoed briefly, then stopped. Elite protection depends on coordination. Coordination collapses under confusion. Within minutes, the system that had protected Maduro for years failed, not through weakness, but through speed. There was no speech, no broadcast, no final declaration. Maduro was restrained, escorted, removed. For a leader defined by televised defiance, the silence was profound. By the time senior commanders understood what had happened, the most critical phase, extraction, was already underway. A president had vanished, not killed, not hiding, taken. Extraction is the most dangerous phase. Not because resistance peaks, but because awareness spreads. Orders align. Confusion hardens into response. US aircraft provided cover. Naval assets waited offshore. Timelines tightened. The goal was no longer stealth. It was inevitability. Before dawn, Nicolás Maduro was no longer in Venezuelan territory. Hours later, Washington confirmed it. A sitting head of state was in US custody. The response was immediate and fractured. Supporters praised decisiveness. Critics called it kidnapping under another name. The language of war didn't fit. Neither did extradition. The US position was blunt. Maduro was a criminal, not a legitimate leader. Sovereignty, they argued, does not shield narco-terrorism. Opponents countered, If one state can seize another's leader unilaterally, no border is safe. Both sides understood the same thing. The rules were no longer shared. Maduro appeared not on a balcony but in a courtroom. No uniform, no audience, no stage. For prosecutors, it was the culmination of years of work. For critics, it was proof that force, not law, had decided the outcome. For Venezuela, it was something else entirely. A vacuum. The military did not collapse, but it recalibrated. Interim leadership emerged, denouncing the capture as imperial aggression. Among civilians, reactions were mixed. Some felt relief, others feared chaos. Most were simply exhausted. After years of crisis, even change felt heavy. The capture of Nicolás Maduro did more than remove a leader. It tested a taboo and proved it breakable. Supporters call it accountability. Critics warn the international order absorbed a fracture it may not survive. Both recognize the implication. Power is no longer assumed permanent. That night, permanence dissolved quietly, without speeches, without explosions. And by morning, the world understood what that meant.